So, today in the live session, we are focusing on the regions of Chungnam-do and Chungbuk-do, which I personally prefer. If I show you some data, there is a section called regional analysis, and within that, there is a ranking. Looking at the rankings, I consider the job market to be very important in the real estate sector. As I mentioned in a recent video, the Samsung semiconductor cluster, along with Hynix semiconductors and areas like Dongtan, Pyeongtaek, Anseong, and Yongin are all expected to become key regions for job growth in South Korea. We can actually verify job data here. Let's look at the job growth rate over the past year. The top region for job growth is Ulsan, followed by Chungcheongnam-do in second place, Incheon in third, Gyeongsangnam-do in fourth, and Chungbuk-do in fifth. Real estate experts often say to invest in areas with job growth, population, and resources, particularly in the metropolitan area. However, the actual data shows that job growth is currently happening in the provinces. Outside of the metropolitan area, particularly Incheon, there is significant job growth in the provinces. I have repeatedly mentioned that Ulsan is a region with a lot of potential for future growth. In fact, some areas are already seeing an increase, and Chungcheongnam-do and Chungbuk-do are ranked 2nd and 5th, respectively, indicating that jobs are increasing significantly, especially in Chungcheongnam-do. Of course, if you click on the city and district, you can see where job growth is significant, based on those areas. If you look Yongin, particularly in the Gihunggu area, is remarkable. However, one thing to keep in mind is that the job data here is based on the company address, so the actual data may vary a bit. You should take that into consideration. The second place is Gangdong-gu. So I mentioned Gangdong-gu, right? What did I say? Some of you may have already seen my video where I discussed why we should pay attention to Gangdong-gu in the future. One of the pieces of data I mentioned at that time was related to job growth. And the population, particularly young women and children, is very high in the neighborhood of Gangdong-gu. And now, if you go into Richgo in Gangdong-gu, you will see that there are subway developments listed here. Because of this, Gangdong-gu is one of the neighborhoods that I have high expectations for in the future. Incheon Yonsu-gu is also experiencing continuous job growth. Next is Ulsan-dong-gu, where jobs are also increasing significantly. We also have Yeosu, which is seeing job growth as well. So, if you look here, Gyeoje, Ulsan, Goyang, Deogyang-gu, Chungcheongnam-do, Dangjin, and Songpa-gu are all seeing job increases in the metropolitan area, but it's important to remember that jobs are also increasing significantly in the provinces. As with all investments, even if the current situation is not good, it can yield significant returns later. Therefore, I believe we need to pay attention to the provincial real estate market and be mindful of timing. To do this, we are listening to this membership live session for our members. Now let's dive into the regions. We will be conducting expert analysis today, focusing on Chungcheongnam-do and Chungbuk-do. Additionally, there is very urgent and important news that was announced today. Of course, I will later create a proper analysis video to share, but for now, let me briefly mention that the stress DSR is set to be implemented starting in September without any delays. However, what has been strongly added here is that the stress DSR virtual interest rate for the metropolitan area will be raised from 0.75% to 1.2%. What are we talking about? It means they are going to control housing prices in the metropolitan area right now. And what are these policies? The real estate supply measures announced on August 8th cannot be implemented immediately, but regulations that directly affect finance will have an immediate impact on the market. Therefore, I expect that there will be quite a few changes starting from September when the second phase of the stress DSR is implemented. Returning to Chungcheongnam-do, its investment score is ranked first in the country. What are we talking about? When considering the regions, Chungcheongnam-do is currently the best area for real estate investment. Hello to our Jongsu-bin and JGS. Chungcheongnam-do, Gyeongsangnam-do, Gyeongsangbuk-do, and Chungbuk-do are all relevant, and Chungbuk-do is currently ranked 8th with a score of 60. A score of 73 is considered the knee level, meaning it's quite good right now. I had made some investments in Chungcheongnam-do back in September 2019 when the investment score was 80. Of course, you should never make decisions based solely on one investment score, but it can serve as a guideline. From that perspective, my investments at that time were very successful since I entered at the bottom. However, now it's around 73, which is a bit of a knee level, and there may be even better opportunities ahead. But for those who are considering investing, it's not a bad time. The current transaction prices and rental prices in Chungnam-do are not bad either, showing a slight upward trend. The current undervaluation of rentals in Chungnam-do is at 3%, while Chungbuk-do is at 3.3%. This indicates that there isn't much of a bubble right now. The current level of the Housing Purchase Burden Index in Chungnam-do is similar to just before the financial crisis, at 64, which has significantly decreased from 80 to 64. Let's take a look at the data to see if there is a possibility of a decline. The average is 64, and the low point was when I bought it, but that was too low. So let's consider around 55. Around 55 was the case in 2016 and also at the end of 2019. So 55 is almost the bottom. Now this means that it is overvalued by about 3 to 14%. Therefore, looking at this, we can conclude that the apartments in Chungnam-do are not that overvalued. So what does this mean? It means that you can buy apartments in Chungnam-do at auction right now. Yes, you can buy them at auction because you can save enough, about 10 to 15%. Therefore, for those considering purchasing a home through auction, it is not a bad idea to buy in Gyeongsangnam-do even now. Now, if I show you the auction data again, you might wonder why this is a short-term rebound during the current downward trend. I have many reasons for this, but one of the main reasons is the auction. In July, the number of auctions increased significantly. In July, it reached 17,000, the highest ever. Since when? Since then, it has reached an all-time high. However, the current situation is becoming extremely precarious. As I mentioned in a recent video, there are several similarities to the situation in 2007. Therefore, if concerns about an economic recession arise next year, the number of auctions will increase exponentially. So, what about auctions? We must seize the opportunity. On September 28th, I will be giving a forecast lecture. On that day, the stress DSR will be applied, and I mentioned that there would be a turning point in the real estate market. By the end of September, we should see whether these developments will materialize. Therefore, the direction of the real estate market in September will be a crucial turning point for assessing the overall real estate market through October, November, December, and into next year. Because of this, I encourage those who haven't registered yet for my forecast lecture on September 28th at 11 a.m. to do so. You can find the registration link in the comments. Additionally, on the same day, in the afternoon, I will be collaborating with our auction expert, Kim Tae-hyun, to reveal how powerful investments can be when big data is combined with auctions. The lecture link hasn't been created yet, but I will share it soon, so it would be great if you could join that as well. Currently, the number of auction cases is increasing significantly, so it's important for everyone to keep this in mind. Making good decisions is excellent, but we must also consider what happens when we make poor decisions. For example, some people are saying that housing prices are going up. There are those who bought based on what these people said, and there are others who haven't bought yet, listening to Kim Gi-hoon's advice. Let's assume that according to these people's predictions, prices will continue to rise. In that case, what is the worst case scenario for those who didn't listen to Kim Gi-hoon? The only downside would be that they missed out on the price increase. However, if Kim Gi-hoon's data-driven predictions turn out to be correct, what happens then? Those who bought real estate, after hearing the rising price talk from others, what has happened to them? Aren't they now facing contempt? What does that imply? If you make a wrong decision, your life can fall into a pit. Seriously, listen to the stories of those who have gone all in to buy land, buildings, or apartments. Their lives can just plummet into despair. That's why, what? It is crucial not to make wrong decisions in real estate, and it is very important to always consider risks from various perspectives. This is extremely significant. The fact that auctions are still increasing indicates that we are currently in a major downward market trend, and I believe that the number of auctions will increase significantly by next fall and the end of next year. Therefore, it would be wise to prepare calmly for the perfect timing to secure your own home without rushing. So, first of all, Chungnam-do has a very good investment score, and it is not overly valued. It is about 5 to 15% overvalued. This means that buying through auctions from now on is not a bad idea. If we compare it, the housing prices in Chungnam are cheaper than in Gangwon-do. The burden of purchasing a home is lower in Chungnam, which, in a way, seems illogical, since there should be many more jobs, especially good jobs, in Chungnam. Therefore, housing prices in Chungnam are currently very low. Next, looking at the Jont's Lease Housing Purchase Burden Index, Jont's prices have also dropped to an average level. They could drop a bit more, but it is around 44, which is less than 10%. Thus, there is not much of a bubble in either sales or Johnson. Please keep this in mind. I think there will come a time when I will go back to buy an apartment in Chungnam. Now, Chungnam has a relatively high PIR. So since the 2000s were too low, let's exclude that and start looking from around 2013. Since 2013, if you look at it this way, the PIR is currently at 4.5 and the low point is now at 4.1. I think that by the end of this year or around next year, I will probably write a new book on big data in real estate investment. In fact, the Richgo system has been significantly updated in recent years. Because when I invested in September 2019, there was no such sophisticated PIR data or housing purchase burden index data. At that time, I had no idea about the traps and errors associated with the statistics of real estate prices and such. Back then, in September and October of 2019, I made some investments in Chungnam. Looking at this now, I can see that it was indeed the most recent and sophisticated update on the PIR and housing purchase burden. It clearly shows that my buying timing in September and October of 2019 was a rare opportunity that comes once in a decade or so. In fact, one of the investment returns I achieved in Chungnam was approximately 1,500% compared to the principal over 2 years. You might find it hard to believe, but this was one of the regions where I realized such an incredible return. Next, this compares the rental yield to bank interest rates. Even in the fall of 2019, the rental yield was 2.9% higher than the bank interest rate, indicating that apartment prices were not overvalued at that time. However, the country interest rates have changed since then. If you look at the deposit interest rates, they were below 2% from the mid-2010s to early 2020, but now the bank deposit interest rate is 3.5%. Therefore, we need to compare it with the bank deposit interest rates. Currently, the rental yield in Chungnam is 4.3%, the highest in the country. This indicates that housing prices are not overvalued. However, when I invested, the yield was nearly 3% compared to bank interest rates. But now it has dropped to only 0.8%. Therefore, what should you do? You need to wait for a time when you can buy at a lower price. What are the options? You can either wait or consider buying through auction. So, if you want to buy now, you should wait for auctions. Furthermore, when the real estate market begins to decline again, there may be a temporary negative impact nationwide. In such a case, due to the current heavy taxation on acquisition tax, investors are unable to invest. Therefore, for those looking to secure their own home now, buying through auction in relatively undervalued areas that are not overly inflated is very advantageous. Why? The players are not able to enter yet. But if the real estate market experiences another decline, and it really happens, then when the acquisition tax increases are lifted, investor players will start to come in. This will make the competition even fiercer. Of course, investing at that time isn't necessarily a bad idea, but everything has its own steps. However, for those who are considering buying a home, I recommend participating in auctions in Chungnam. For those who say, I don't know much about auctions, we will be holding a lecture on September 28th with our auction expert Kim Tae-hoon and Richway's Kim Ki-won, and we will likely start a membership program. If you participate, we will help you a lot with everything from A to Z regarding auctions. So for those who want to buy a home, it would be good to attend the lecture and join the membership later. Now, the rental price ratio in Chungnam is about 75.6%. So, what does this mean? It means that gap investment is possible. I read a newspaper article saying the rental price ratio in Seoul increased slightly, which is absurd. The current rental price ratio in Seoul is less than 50%. At this level, gap investment is not possible. However, there may be some individuals who still engage in it. However, when the rental price ratio is this low, gap investing is, as you would realize, in hindsight, not a very good investment. Now, moving on to why I believe Chungnam will continue to thrive. As you saw earlier, Chungnam-do has seen a significant increase in jobs, and there isn't much of a bubble. Instead of rising, it has led to a substantial decline in supply. I actually sold some of my properties in advance because of this. However, as time goes on, the supply will continue to decrease. If we look at the overall supply, there isn't much available. This is related to the relocation and demolition process, and it's not confirmed yet. But to better understand the future supply, we have included properties in the relocation and demolition stages as part of the supply. Even with this consideration, there isn't much available for occupancy. This means that while supply is decreasing and jobs are increasing, demand is continuously rising. Let's also take a look at the population. Many real estate experts are mistaken. Is the population in Seoul decreasing? No, it isn't. What I want to convey in the real estate market is that it's neither a rise nor a fall. I want to base my statements on objective data. Of course, I could still be wrong, right? There are so many variables that affect the real estate market, especially now that government policies are very strong. When these come into play, the data may be incorrect. However, that doesn't mean we should ignore the data. That's not the case. To make successful decisions in real estate, we need to rely on data as our guiding light and use real estate navigation to make decisions based on the situation at hand. Let's take a look at where the population has increased. We will examine the last 3 years. And during this period, the only places where the population has significantly increased are Sejong, Incheon, Gyeonggi, and Chungnam-do. Is the population in Seoul increasing? The metropolitan area is not increasing, but Incheon and Gyeonggi-do are. Now let's take a look at the local regions over the past year. So, who is in first place? It's Incheon. Who's in second place? It's Sejong. And who's in third place? It's Chungnam-do. Since Sejong is a special place, let's exclude it for now. The only area where the population is still increasing is Chungnam-do. I'm going to stop because my throat hurts. What I'm saying is that Chungnam-do is a region that holds a lot of promise right now. Do you understand? Now, let's take a look at the supply of move-in units on a quarterly basis. As you can see, the supply of move-in units is high up until the third quarter of this year. However, if we look at it this way, the period of excessive supply on a quarterly basis is coming to an end. This chart shows the quarterly supply of move-in units from 2008 to 2027, nearly 20 years. When was it the highest? It was during the adjustment period in Chungnam-do in 2016 and 2017 when the supply was high. When was it high again? Recently, it was at its peak. But now, what happens going forward? There will be no more supply bombs. It has ended. So, once we pass the third quarter of this year, the fourth quarter and next year will see some supply, but it won't be significant. The era of oversupply in Chungnam-do is coming to an end, and there isn't much undervaluation left. Therefore, especially if you approach it through auctions, it could be very beneficial. Next, regarding the unsold properties in Chungnam-do, the situation has slightly improved after a decline, but it remains at a low level. I anticipate that the number of unsold properties in Chungnam-do will significantly decrease by next year. The transaction volume is relatively stable, and while external investments have slightly increased, they are still at a similar level. There hasn't been a major change in listings. Now, we need to look at the supply and demand trends. How is the supply and demand? The selling pressure is decreasing while the buying pressure is still not very strong. However, the trading supply and demand is increasing. This means that the market in Chungnam-do is gradually starting to improve. But for this year, especially in this quarter, there is a large volume of new housing. Starting from October, November and December, the supply volume will decrease. What will happen then? The market will begin to turn around. Of course, since Chungnam-do is large, we need to examine the details in various areas. Therefore, the trading supply and demand is improving. And how is the rental supply and demand? Even with a large supply, the rental demand is improving. This is because jobs are increasing and the population is still growing, making it a very favorable area in Chungnam-do. I believe that starting from the fourth quarter of this year, the rental demand will be better than the current level. Thus, certain areas in Chungnam-do will see a very appropriate and advantageous investment timing. Next, looking at the consumer sentiment index, it remains relatively stable, still slightly below average. The outlook for rental prices and transaction prices is continuously improving, and real estate agents are also optimistic about the future. We expect prices in Chungnam-do to improve now. Look at this. Check out the population and household numbers. In the sales flow chart, it has dipped and is now rising again, continuing to go up like this. What does this mean? The population and the number of households are continuously increasing. Let's look at just the last 2 years. Can you see this? What is the cumulative growth rate of households? It is currently ranked second. Looking at the cumulative population growth rate, Chungnam-do ranks third since 2022. Some people may say it's good or not good, but if you want to make money, you should pay attention to Chungnam-do. It's a good place. Kim Ki-hyun might also invest here later. If we look at job growth over the past year, the area with the highest increase is Chungnam-do, followed by Ulsan. The more red the area is, the more jobs are increasing. Gangwon-do has far fewer jobs than Chungnam-do, and jobs are decreasing there. Yet the housing prices in Gangwon-do are higher than in Chungnam-do, which is nonsensical. The area with the most jobs in Chungnam-do is Hyundai Steel in Dangjin, which has recently seen a significant increase in jobs. Then there's Motras in Asan, and Hyundai Transys in Seosan. There are many jobs in Dangjin, Seosan, Cheonan, and Asan. So, having taken a look at Chuncheongnam-do, let's now move on to Chungcheongbuk-do. In a moment, we will go into more detail and take questions. Now, if we look at Chungcheongbuk-do, it scores 60 points for investors. What does that mean? It's still just about average, so you can consider it to be at a normal level. There aren't many evaluations for John's prices, so it's a good area. You should pay attention to Gangwon-do, Gyeongsangbuk-do, Ulsan, Chungcheongnam-do, Chungcheongbuk-do, Jeollanam-do, and Gyeongsangnam-do, Jeollabuk-do, which areas are risky. Seoul, Sejong, Gyeonggi, and Incheon are currently at risk. They are overvalued, with the sale prices being much more inflated than the actual rental value. You should not be deceived by this. There are people who jump in like this, just like in Blab. The historical chart of the Housing Purchase Burden Index in Chungcheongbuk-do looks like this. And currently, it is at 70. The average is 63. And the lowest point was 51, which I talked about a lot back then regarding Chungcheongbuk-do. So what does that make it? 10 to 27%, which means there is much more of a bubble in Chungcheongbuk-do than in Chungcheongnam-do. Hello, Lee Hyun-mi, nice to meet you. So, looking at the data, Chungcheongbuk-do has more of a bubble than Chungcheongnam-do, but which is better in terms of jobs or population. Chungcheongnam-do is much better than Chungcheongbuk-do. If you ask me, would you invest in Chungcheongbuk-do or Chungcheongnam-do? I invest in Chungcheongnam-do, it's incomparable. Next, the Housing Purchase Burden Index in Chungcheongbuk-do is still high. It remains high. Earlier, I mentioned that the Jeonse prices in Chungcheongnam-do weren't that expensive. But now, the red light is on, indicating that they are somewhat expensive. The rental yield is also not great. It's a bit lower than in Chungcheongnam-do. So, while Chungcheongbuk-do is a very good area, when compared to Chungcheongnam-do, it's clear that Chungcheongnam-do is much better in many ways. Now, regarding why the Jeonse prices in Chungcheongnam-do are still high, it's because there hasn't been much supply of new move-ins. There hasn't been much supply from 2022 to 2024. Therefore, since there hasn't been much supply, John's prices haven't dropped significantly, which is why they are still somewhat expensive. However, in the case of Chungcheongnam-do, there has been a lot of new move-ins, which has caused Jeonse prices to drop significantly. That's why Jeonse is not expensive right now. Also, next year, there will be quite a lot of new move-ins in Chungcheongnam-do and Chungcheongbuk-do. There will be quite a lot next year, and it will continue to be above average until 2026 and 2027, so the possibility of a price increase due to a lack of new move-ins doesn't seem very high. Additionally, when considering reconstruction or redevelopment, the demolition phase in 2020 will see a significant increase by 2027. You should take these factors into account. If we look at this quarterly, you can see that the supply of new move-ins will start to increase from the fourth quarter of this year, and then there will be a brief pause in the first quarter of next year, but it will be plentiful in the second, third, and fourth quarters of next year. And there will be another one in 2026. So if we look at this, it seems that there will still be some wait regarding supply until around the fourth quarter of 2025 or the end of next year. Additionally, the John's prices may undergo some further adjustments. Next, regarding unsold properties, we see a slight decrease after some fluctuations. The transaction volume remains relatively stable, and while external investments are not particularly noticeable, there was a slight increase in June, indicating that people from Seoul are starting to invest more in Chungcheongnam-do. However, there are still no significant changes in supply and demand. In the case of Chungcheongnam-do, the demand for sales is increasing as the selling pressure decreases, but in Chungcheongbuk-do, such trends are not yet visible. There are some signs of recovery in the rental market, but the rental sentiment index in Chungcheongbuk-do is worsening. The sales sentiment index remains stable, and real estate agents are slightly optimistic, as the price outlook index is showing a slight improvement. Unlike Chungcheongnam-do, Chungcheongbuk-do is experiencing a decline, which indicates a decreasing population. If we look at the data since 2022, Chungcheongbuk-do ranked 7th, while Chungcheongnam-do ranked 2nd, showing a significant difference. Although Chungcheongbuk-do is not bad, it is clear that Chungcheongnam-do is a much better region. In terms of job growth over the past year, Chungcheongbuk-do has not seen significant increases, so while there are warning signs for Chungcheongbuk-do, Chungcheongnam-do is facing much more serious issues. In comparison, it is considered a better region than Chungcheongbuk-do. This is the current assessment. I have outlined the overall trends for Chungcheongnam-do and Chungcheongbuk-do. Currently, Chungcheongnam-do has a bubble of 5 to 15%, while Chungcheongbuk-do has a bubble close to 30%. Therefore, it is reasonable to approach Chungcheongnam-do through auctions now. But for Chungcheongbuk-do, it would be better to wait a bit longer. Now let's take a look at the key price trends.